secular speaker series, which we have now rebranded Joy Friday because we need more joy in our lives. Today, a friend of mine shared an article about happiness. Have you noticed that those that support our current regime are typically angry and distrustful? This is a quote from that article. Trumpism is the symptom of a less happy, less trusting society, but we are far from powerless to change this. There are several ways we can each make a difference, starting with our own minds and local communities and finishing with helping others around the world. What gives me hope is realizing we have the potential to understand what's going wrong in our society and do our part to improve it. A great way to respond is with joy and community, and here we all are doing just that. So welcome. Please share in the chat who you are, where you're from, and what you do these days to experience joy. Don't forget to click the blue button on the bottom and change it from host and panelist to everyone so that we can borrow your ideas. But for today, we are speaking with Wendy Via. I got it right. She is the co-founder, CEO, and president of the Global Project Against Hate and Extremism. Launched in 2020, the Global Project Against Hate and Extremism was founded by Heidi, oh gosh, I hope I say her name right, Beirich? And Wendy Via,
Yeah.
Beirich, okay. And Wendy Via to address the gap in efforts to stop transnational hate and far-right extremism movements, particularly US-based activity that is exported to other countries and across borders. Is there anything that you'd like to add to that?
No, except that sometimes it's understanding how we define far-right extremism. One thing that that people should know is that when we do our work, we start, or say on one end, you've got Proud Boys and Patriot Front, and on the other end, you've got Alliance Defending Freedom and Heritage Foundation, because they're all pushing policies or they're willing to commit acts, some wearing coat and ties, some wearing masks, that exclude or harm communities. And so that's sort of the very general way to look at it. And then we make the connections here, I mean, between those groups and then the US and other countries.
Right on. Well, I'm going to let you go ahead. I know that Lindsay's going to be sharing the screen today. So Lindsay, if you want to share the screen, that would be great. Or is it just going to be very small because of the Mac issue? It's always an issue with Macs, I swear.
On my end, it's full screen. Are you all not seeing full screen?
Well, maybe it's based on my view. So let me see if I can change my view side by side speaker. It's still pretty small. We can just, like if we need to, folks, it's going to be hard to see, but if you can maybe just like read out loud the things that are on the screen so that if folks have a hard time seeing it, maybe, I don't know.
Okay, well, you know what? I'm sorry if everybody could bear with us just for 1 minute. I'm going to try to, well, you don't want to see that. Hold on 1 second. I'm going to try to share mine to see if it at least will be a little bit bigger. And I do apologize for, is that any bigger?
Not really, but it's okay. I mean, it is what, oh, that's better. Oh, you did it. Whatever you did, it worked. Keep it that way.
Okay. I made my window bigger. That's what I did. So, okay, well, thanks very much to Secular AZ and to everybody, the entire team, and for all of you for being here today. My name is Wendy Via, and I am the co-founder of Global Project Against Hate and Extremism. This is our mission statement dedicated to strengthening diverse communities, exposing and countering racism, bigotry, religious intolerance, and hate, and promoting human rights that are central to flourishing multicultural societies and democracies. We have four pillars of work. Oh, let me back up. I'm going to tell y'all just a tiny bit about who we are and what we do. And I know that everybody here is very familiar with Project 2025 and the role of Christian nationalism and the challenges that our country and democracy are facing now. So I'm going to just run through some highlights on those issues and a couple of things that have happened in the last few days, because I feel like we are in a position to have a great conversation. So I don't want to take up too much time telling you stuff that you already know. So we at Global Project, we have 4 pillars. We generally combat hate and extremism, and as I explained a little bit ago, that runs from what you consider to be sort of the street hate groups and all the way to those that wear coat and ties. And it has taken us years to get people to understand that hate can wear a coat and tie. We hold tech companies accountable for any number of issues related to human rights, particularly hate speech and the demonization of communities online and how that leads to violence. We influence policy both at the state level and the national level and at the international level. And then we work in coalitions quite a bit. We work with lots of folks in the United States and then lots in Europe and Latin America. Just quickly, I know that I didn't have a chance to update based on the Florida shooting. So that would be 3 things this week or this weekend to now. We have under our combating hate and extremism, violent extremism, you have a situation where a Wisconsin teen murdered his parents and was arrested for those murders, but also a neo-Nazi plot to assassinate President Trump. And then Governor Shapiro out of Pennsylvania was his home and family were victims of an arson attack, and the guy said that he would like to hit him with the hammer, which of course he learned from the Pelosi attack. And I just bring that up just to sort of put, we're not going to talk a lot about, well, unless y'all want to have questions later on, but in the presentation, I'm not going to talk a ton about domestic terrorism, except for to say that when we think about domestic terrorism or hate crimes, we should not only think about, as I said, groups like Proud Boys and Patriot Front. We have to think about the political figures who, with their comments, with their endless hateful rhetoric, how that can be the motivator for those who are willing or on the edge of committing violence. So that's why I bring that up, and we can talk more about it later if you want to. When it comes to the tech companies, you all saw, I'm sure, all the tech company leaders get up there on the dais and welcome Trump into the presidency. It was, for those of us who have been working in this field for as long as we have, and back when we started, there were no policies at any of the companies. But to have worked all that time and made such progress, and then to have them cave. And what Meta did was say, I mean, this is their statement. This is what their policy says. This is new to Trump being elected and to conforming to the Christian nationalist agenda. We allow allegations of mental illness or abnormality when based on gender or sexual orientation, given political and religious discourse about transgenderism, which is not a word, and homosexuality, and common non-serious usage of words like weird. So that was in direct response to the campaign language, and they caved because that was specifically forbidden before, specifically forbidden. And if you are in Europe, if you do that online on Meta, then you will get arrested because that is not allowed. And then they also allow for content arguing for gender-based limitations of military, law enforcement, and teaching jobs. And allow the same content based on sexual orientation when the content is based on religious beliefs. So as you can see, it is a complete cave to the Christian nationalist agenda. And on top of that, as they were loosening these rules, it wasn't just women and LGBTQ people, they also included immigrants and other people of color. So moving on, you all know Project 2025 is the far right playbook for American authoritarianism. We said that back in October 2023. We were one of the first to do an analysis of it. It's on our website now. We did it from the civil and human rights lens. But what is important is to understand how implementing Project 2025 is actually implementing the characteristics and traits of an authoritarian government. So you do things like polarize the population. And also remember, this didn't just happen in these last few months. This has been, I mean, go back to 2015 and the slide that we have experienced in what is okay and what isn't okay. So these are the specific tactics: polarize the people, spread lies and conspiracies, destroy the checks and balances. That's what we're seeing right now with the judiciary and the legislative branch, because it is essentially held hostage by the president. But remember, it's not, as y'all know, in Arizona, so much of this stuff happens at the state level because they incubate it. Arizona is a state, my state of Alabama is a state, Texas, and so they start this process not just at the federal level, but at the state level. Demonize opponents in the media. The media is all fake news. They're failing, on and on and on, the things they say about it. Suppress free speech and the rights of women and minorities. That is specifically in Project 2025. It is a specific characteristic of authoritarianism, is to weaken the rights of already marginalized communities. And then you turn around and blame them for all the country's problems. So we are seeing that in that they blamed, immigrants. Obviously, I know that's an issue that y'all are very, very familiar with being in Arizona. But if you give the people an enemy and you say that you are the person who can solve that problem and keep them safe, and people buy into it, well, you've moved pretty far along the authoritarian spectrum. And then, of course, um, reward loyalists and punish defectors. What are we seeing? People getting investigations dropped against them. January 6th rioters getting pardons. People who worked in the former administration that upset the president are now being investigated. It goes on and on and on. And this dehumanization and fear mongering, again, it's like give everybody a common enemy, but then it makes it easier to commit violence to implement these very, very oppressive laws like we are seeing with the LGBTQ community, particularly the transgender community, but and the immigrant community. It is one thing I want to say, and maybe I say it later in the presentation, but I don't think it can be said too often, is that what we're seeing today is not the end game. The end game is to marginalize everybody, but essentially white Christian men. That seems hyperbolic, or maybe, we would be told we're being a little hysterical, but I mean, at this point, we have evidence to show that that's where they're heading. For Project 2025, it is not only a risk to the US, but globally. Our friends in Europe and in Latin America are very, very concerned about the impact, which of course we're seeing now. All this tariff business, all of that's all part of Project 2025. There's a ton of economic advice in the manifesto. So this is, of course, who it is most impacted. And because y'all know, yes, Alliance Defending Freedom is Arizona based. We have been watching Alliance Defending Freedom, I don't know for how long, but Heidi and I used to work at the Southern Poverty Law Center, and we were instrumental in deciding that they were to be labeled a hate group, which at that time what had a huge impact because this behavior has been so normalized. It's hard to shame anybody anymore because they have no shame. So they are officially going after birth control. they are going after the agency, I mean, or the coalition of physicians, OBGYNs, who make recommendations about to the FDA and to other groups about what should be covered by insurance. Well, right now, because they're trying to bypass the courts, they're going straight to the administration. They want to get rid of IUDs. They haven't specifically said birth control pills yet because there are other medical applications for birth control pills. But I mean, it's 100% coming. Um, so we should not think that we have experienced the worst yet, because the end game is for women to have no control, no bodily autonomy. And then, of course, we all know that Mike Johnson, who was the Speaker of the House, spent 10 years at the Alliance Defending Freedom, defending religious freedom cases. I say that in air quotes. Y'all are probably familiar with this. They never hid their agenda. And this has been done. This was done like in the first week of Trump's administration. So all of this language has been removed, along with a lot of other stuff, particularly anything that they rule as being DEI, which of course impacts many, many communities. Like here in Alabama, y'all may have heard of the Tuskegee Airmen. They took the Tuskegee Airmen down. I mean, and then it had to go back up. But this is the people that are charged with implementing these insane orders don't know what to do. And so in their minds, anything to do with women, anything to do with gay people, anything to do with black people, it's got to come down, because I mean, ultimately that's what they want anyway. One specific thing about, and it's coming, we're going to see some of this in the next big budget, but they want to economically persuade families to stay together. They want women to be married. They especially want Black women to be married. They want things like child support for the men to have more control over it. Like the men, let me back up. The non-custodial parent. I say men because, the vast majority of non-custodial parents are men. They want to give tax breaks for being married. Like right now they call it the marriage penalty, right? So they want to reverse that. So some people will say, well, that's great, but they're doing it not really to help married people, but to encourage people to get married or stay married. I mean, there's lots of examples, but the point is that they're willing to use the power of the government, the power of the purse, to ensure that their view of the traditional family is fulfilled. And that's what I was just talking about, is what else is coming to ensure that the traditional family, and that is how they describe it, is the most like fundamental aspect of our society. Now, I'm not saying that families are not fundamental to our society. I am saying that their definition of what a family is how it is to be. Oh yeah, and here's a comment about the child support. And to how women should be married and should have children, all of which women should do if that's what they want to do. The point is that they have choices about their lives that these folks would like to take away. And now the IVF case, I don't know if y'all know, that was in Alabama. We were so proud to once again be in the headlines because of that. And that was a huge mistake. But the the people at Heritage and Alliance Defending Freedom and all those groups behind Project 2025 were livid. And they have a huge presence in Alabama because it really is an incubator state. But there was no way, you cannot, I mean, it was just, it wasn't going to happen. But they're going to, I mean, the thing about these folks, or the thing about the far right Christian nationalist movement, is they don't see a loss as something that stops them. They just see it as a step in their long-term plan, and they are willing to keep their eye on the ball and to expend whatever resources are available to get there. They've been working since Roe, and now they've gotten it overturned. That's 50 years. And so, yeah, IVF was a loss, but it's not going to stop them. Now they're going to go after contraception, and it'll just be a matter of time, they believe, before they can get IVF. And then, that Christian nationalism, I don't think that Trump himself is concerned with it at all. I think it is a means to an end. And the people who are pushing it, like Russell Vogt, are people who also have the answers to give Trump this unprecedented executive power. And that's what he wanted. And so it was, a, a merging of two sort of tragic goals. Just a couple of days ago, Kevin Roberts and William Wolfe, Kevin Roberts being the head of Heritage, William Wolfe being a person who kind of goes different places. I mean, they have, in the past, they've made sort of passing reference to other religions, and that people should have religious freedom. All people should have religious freedom. They have made a lot about the Jewish faith recently. I don't particularly believe that well, let me say, I believe they have an ulterior motive with that. But in this op-ed they just wrote for the Daily Signal, which is a publication associated with the Heritage Foundation, the United States must become known as a champion of religious freedom, especially for Christians. So they're completely dropped the veneer at this point, which is alarming. And so just wait, I think I'm missing some slides. That slide was in the wrong place. I'm sorry. I don't know if y'all have seen this. This is the statement on Christian nationalism and the gospel. If you haven't, I have a link to it. It's William Wolfe is one of the authors, but it came about, I think, like 18 months or so ago, in response to the fact that progressive people, and like our organization is one of them, are working very hard to get people to understand that Christian nationalism is not the Christian faith, and that we are not in any way denigrating people of faith or Christianity, or certainly, any other, Judaism, Islam. It is not about that. It is about taking your faith, determining what you think it means, and then imposing that on not just the people in your life or your community, but on the entire nation against our Constitution. So this is quite an interesting read. If any of y'all, I can share it. I think you, especially if given your concern with separation of church and state. And then, of course, you probably heard Marco Rubio, his hunt for anti-Christian bias. So it's like a snitch line to turn in or to report incidents that you experienced under the Biden administration, where you were made to feel uncomfortable or that somebody was having bias against you because you expressed, say, an anti-LGBTQ sentiment because of your religion, or because you I mean, I can't even think of examples. I'm sure y'all can think of examples. I can't think of any more right now. But the point is that you can do it anonymously into this little database, and then they're going to investigate them, which is completely illegal, at least under our current laws. But we'll see if that remains our law. Let me see if I did this. All right. I often get asked about, well, I'm so sorry about my slideshow. I was in charge of it as opposed to somebody who actually knows what they're doing. And so I have a couple of things out of place. I wanted to share with y'all that every week we publish our Project 2025 update. and it examines how Project 2025 is being implemented in real life and the real life consequences of it. Everything from what has happened to an individual to what's happening to our Native Americans. I mean, there is no aspect of life that is not covered by Project 2025, and there is no aspect that they're not pushing. So I invite y'all to please sign up for this and get these updates. They're really very interesting. And then we often get asked about what we can do. So I can also share this. Um, but these are the things that I recommend. Because I mean, and I know that you all do policy work and that's absolutely very important. Not everybody does. Policy work is among the most important. But in terms of community, like if your friends and neighbors say, what can I do without, because people are worried about what to do right now. People are worried that if they protest that something could happen to them, like we're not living in America anymore. We still are, and we absolutely can exercise our rights. Even if people try to take them away, that doesn't mean we stop exercising. The only thing I would say is that if at some point something becomes illegal, then I would not encourage you to do anything illegal because that would be problematic. And also, if you go to a demonstration or a protest, don't because now you're going to always have counter protesters. Don't engage, exercise your right, say what you want to say. But if it becomes violent or if it looks like it's going downhill, then I recommend that everybody leave. And that doesn't mean you're giving up. It means you're being safe. Because there will be another day. So anyway, one last thing I want to mention is don't just read progressive news outlets. Read the conservative news outlets. And by that, I don't mean the Daily Signal. I mean things like the Bulwark. Because one of the things I have a real issue with is how you got somebody like Stephen Miller being characterized as conservative. He is so far right wing fringe that, I mean, there's not even a definition for it. And so, what we want is for people who are conservative, because you can have debates with conservative people, you can have policy disagreements, you can come to, you can negotiate. There's all these things that you can do, even if you don't specifically agree on everything. And we don't want to make it worse by being afraid of absolutely sane people who just don't happen to agree on some policy issues. Where are they going to go? Like right now, the party is being held by Trump. But as these people, and I truly hope that this happens, as they start to kind of come to their senses, they could still be called conservatives. And so, like the authors of The Bulwark, very conservative, but they believe in democracy. So that's a way to get multiple points of view. And then these are a couple of books I recommend. Timothy Snyder's On Tyranny and On Freedom, although it was heartbreaking for him to move to Canada. And then I got him Tim Alberta, who wrote The Kingdom, the Power, and the Glory, specifically about Christian nationalism and sort of spiritual warfare. And so I think that is it. That is how you can reach us and sign up for our newsletter. Um, so that's it. And I thank you for letting me talk for a while. And I look forward to having a discussion now. And y'all can ask me about anything if it is domestic terrorism, because that is right. That is in the news a lot right now. So any of those issues, I'm happy to talk about.
Okay, I am going back over the chat to take a look. There is the comment about, the difference between conservatives and fascists. Let's see. These are more just comments than questions. Let's see. Hold on one second, because I swear I saw one. Oh, well, here's a comment. that maybe not everybody on this call knows, but people say that if 3.5% of the population in the country protests nonviolently, then we could actually take our democracy back. So it does make a difference. And I really like that slide that you showed with all the different resources. I wonder if you might be willing to share that slide with us so that we could, share those with our guests today. There's a comment here. Didn't Bishop Buddy, the one who spoke out against Trump, experience anti-Christian bias? Boy, she sure did.
He sure did. But then I want to add that, and I thought this was a very important thing that the head of the Episcopal Church, I'm not sure of the exact title, came out and supported her wholeheartedly and said that that was the platform of the church, which, as you know, there is a lot of division in in faith communities right now. And so I thought that was super important because I believe that the faith community is going to be one of our biggest assets in this fight.
There is a question in the Q&A. Where can we find events the organization holds for us to participate in them? I'm in Pennsylvania. Honestly, I usually find events on Facebook, which I know is not the best. So I would imagine that slide with the other resources on there might be a good start.
Yeah, yes, the 50-51 tomorrow is a day of national action. I don't want to characterize it as anti-Trump. It's more like pro-democracy, pro-people. And so 50-51, keep your hands off. That was a couple of weeks ago. That was the organization that create that I'm sorry, that organized, that's what I'm looking for, organize the protests across the country. Anyway, on that list, yes, there are. I mean, I don't know. I mean, if you're in reliable Facebook groups, I mean, everything is local, right? And so, I mean, I wouldn't discount it, but they do need to be reliable. But these other organizations have, signups, and they'll let you know. And I think 50-51 actually, like, you put in your zip code and they tell you what's closest to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some of these groups have really streamlined their communications and plugging people in. It's pretty amazing the work that Indivisible is doing, 50-51. I know that we have people on this call who are involved with both organizations. So this is a good group of people who usually do show up to these events. Does your organization provide guidelines for keeping safe at events as well? Is that what I heard you say?
Well, I mean, I certainly have in the past. We've written pieces on it, but and I don't even know if they're available. I think I know. Let me think for just a second. I think How We Fight Back published something just this week about how to exercise your right to peaceful protest and the guidelines for that. If they didn't, ACLU will have something. My advice is my advice is always don't engage with the counter protesters, because you're not going to change anybody's mind. You run the risk of tempers flaring, and and then we cannot discount the fact that we're going to have an increased police presence at some point, if because the administration will see it as a need to have police presence and to quash dissent, because that is one of the most important things to do on the road to authoritarianism. So that's always my advice. Go, show up, follow the rules, say your piece, but keep yourself safe.
Mm-hmm. I even heard somebody recommending, getting a burner phone, right? Like not to, putting in maybe just, memorizing a couple numbers and having a phone. Like you know, just in case. I saw something today where they were recommending getting rid of, if you're going to a protest, you might want to get rid of your facial or your thumbprint recognition on your phone, just in case.
Yeah.
Just to keep yourself as safe as possible. And I mean, I've gone to protests before where I wrote my friend's number and magic marker on my leg so that because nowadays we don't remember anybody's phone numbers. So
No.
I told her too, hey, just so you know, if you get a call from an unknown number, it might be me.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, I don't know that I had heard that for the protest. I definitely have heard it for the border because we work a lot across borders. And actually, my staff is not, some of them are not in the United States. And they're coming to the United States. And so we had to have a lot of conversations about what the risks were and, you know, what to do with their devices. Would they be turned back? You know, it is not conversations that anybody actually on this planet would have ever thought that we were having. Um, so yeah, I don't think you can take the fact that we have civil liberties and that we have civil rights for granted these days.
No, no, it's really wild too when you see somebody like I think he's the president of El Salvador showing up and hanging out in the Oval Office and contrasting that to the same Oval Office with Zelensky and how he was treated. I mean, like my grandfathers who fought for their country are rolling over in their graves right now, you know.
Well, that was a particularly sickening event.
And then I don't know if anybody saw this today. I'm no longer on X, but the White House today like took a New York Times article and wrote on, like edited it, marked it up, and I'm like, they're defying the Supreme Court. Who else in the world is allowed to do that?
Well, nobody's allowed to even defy a district court, because that you would find yourself under the jail, right? That's just what would happen. And, but I mean, I'm not for incarceration, don't get me wrong, but people have to follow the rules because that's how we keep our society intact. And we cannot have chaos and anarchy. And Trump is pushing that, and all of his administration. And I always stress that it's not just Trump, it's like the people, and it's not a huge group of people who are pulling
No.
the strings. They're the ones that are pushing all of this because they know they're going to lose some, but they're going to win some. And the wins are going to lead them to the next set of wins. And that really comes with the expanding the executive powers. For example, taking the ability of the agencies to do rulemaking away. That was, or to enforce rulemaking, I should say. That was a big blow to everybody, really.
Yeah, it's Kate comments, any officer or person in authority who obeys illegal orders is how Trump wins. There's a conversation here about one of our congressmen, Siscomani, part of let's see, members of the Hispanic Republican group and is concerned about Medicaid, but I wish he would actually speak out and be willing to buck his party. I mean, I don't remember who it was yesterday who was, a Republican saying, I don't agree with any of this, but Trump threatens people, so I'm just going to go along with it. And it's like, lady, you're kind of getting paid to stand up to this kind of stuff, maybe?
It is a particularly disappointing situation when our elected figures won't do their jobs because of their own self-interest. I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying that everybody is in that situation. Maybe they're biding their time, whatever it is, but I do feel like we should see people being a lot more outspoken. And of course, I'm putting the burden on the Republicans because I know that all of them do not agree with Trump, and they don't agree with the stuff that's happening. And it's going to require them to find their courage to
Oh,
us to move forward.
yeah. And Diane just put a great quote in here. Chris May said, "We need courts, crowds, and courage." I
Oh,
love
I
that.
didn't see that. Yeah.
I love that. Perfect timing. Um, aside from the United States, are there other areas? I mean, like we can kind of see the other problem areas in the world, but are there newer problem areas that are coming up that we might not be aware of?
There's a lot of activity in Latin America. There has always been a lot of Christian national or I mean, it was anti-LGBTQ, anti-choice activity in Latin America, particularly in the Caribbean, because I'm sure y'all know that many of those islands have laws that are left over from England back a couple of 100 years ago, and so they haven't been updated even if they're not enforced. And so what happens is a group like Alliance Defending Freedom comes in and tries to get the law that's on the books enforced, and creates havoc. And they've won. It's been a successful strategy on the African continent, and it has been successful in Latin America. It is becoming less successful in the Caribbean. But when we're talking about countries like Argentina and Peru and Chile and Brazil and Colombia, all the groups behind Project 2025 have not all of them, but the legal groups, and the so-called family groups have a big presence down there. And it is getting, it's becoming more difficult to combat that. And part of the problem is that leaders like Milei or Bolsonaro or Bukele, whoever it is, they're going to be best buds with the president of the United States. And whether they personally believe that these rights should be stripped, it doesn't matter, because if they do it, then they're following the lead of the president, and they're going to get whatever it is they need. Plus, they already have authoritarian leanings, and they come from countries that have been either ruled by the military or have had dictatorships, because those democracies are not that old. I mean, in some cases, 20 to 30 years. And it's easier to go backwards. And Project 2025 is also a playbook for them. But if you look at the Project 2025 groups, they have one for Europe. It was called Agenda Europe. They've changed the names because a lot of documents leaked. And they, and where they have close relationships in Italy and France. They're really gaining traction in the UK, but primarily you have Hungary and Albania, Romania, some of the Eastern European former bloc countries where they have the most success. Again, because these are not long established democracies.
Here's a question from Jonathan. In saying that taking power of enforcement of rulemaking from agencies, are you referring specifically to overturn of Chevron rule or something else?
No, I'm referring to Chevron.
Okay.
And that matters. Well, I was just going to add, there is, because all the environmental protections, they're trying to find a way to strip them. And just like the EPA is not going to be able to affect that. And there's a lot more, Jonathan, but that's just one that came to mind. In fact, there is a rumor that there's going to be an executive order next week that removes climate change from charitable environment work. So, but they really want to get rid of the environmental protections, and that is, the free market stuff aspect that they want to pursue. And the environment's going to take a huge, huge hit.
Yeah. Okay. We're still looking for some hope on this Friday. Okay. So let's see if we can find
Wait a
some.
minute, let me see.
No, I'll get to that at the end. I promise you. There's a comment, it looks like here from Preston. The right seems to be very focused and coordinated under Project 2025. There are a lot of good organizations and efforts on the left, but it seems to be fragmented. Are there any efforts to have a pull together the various organizations into a more cohesive coalition to focus the resistance activities? Do you know if
Yeah, I know. I mean, Preston, you make a very good point, and it is one that people in our sector make all the time.
Mhm.
We suffer from a lack of coordination and some infighting, um, in a way that the right does not. We also do not have the resources that
Mm-mm.
the right does.
Mhm.
And I mean, it's just a completely different approach for civil society because all these groups we're talking about, the think tanks we're talking about, they're also civil society. And and you need a variety of perspectives to have a robust civil society. And it's just that on the right, you have different sources of revenue. Like there's a lot of faith-based um, donations, but then you also have, some billionaires who don't ask. And I know as a nonprofit that you were familiar with fundraising, that don't ask a lot of, of these questions that seem to make very little sense. They just do it. Here's the end
Mhm.
goal. Do your thing. And
Mhm.
so there is a different mindset between, I don't want to say the left and the right, but between more progressive, inclusive people
Mhm.
and those who wish to impose their will on others. Um, and but there we are coming together. There's a coalition called Democracy 2025, of which we are a member. It is primarily focused on litigation right now. Then there's what we have. One of the things that the progressive sector has experienced in these last couple of months, and I think it's going to get worse in the next couple of months, is people were afraid. They were afraid to say that they were associated with democracy organizations or domestic terrorist organizations, two things that we are at
Mhm.
Project, but because of the retribution.
Mhm.
And it's very real. Now, it is completely illegal for the president or any of his agents to demand IRS activity. It's illegal, but I'm not sure if that matters. And we don't know how that will play out. And so it's just now we had to deal with a lot of people obeying in advance. Yeah, I know you're familiar with that term because it's happening. The law firms have, I mean, it's just the tech companies, all of it
Mhm.
is happening, and it makes people afraid to stand up. And it's almost always the ones who actually have the least to lose because they have so much, as opposed to the people
Mhm.
who have hardly anything and are putting it all on the line. But we're moving away. I think we're turning a corner on that. So hopefully we will have better coordination among the democracy sector.
There is another question from David. The frustration I have is that while there are many groups and organizations that exist to show discontent and fight back, it seems we can't really make progress until and unless we can make progress with our friends, family, coworkers, etc., who support Trump, MAGA, Christian nationalists, and others. Otherwise, it is and will remain a back and forth battle. Any advice on winning them over?
Okay, well, let me just say, I mean, I know y'all live in Arizona, but I live in Alabama. Okay. And so I, you know, I've got family, you've got all, I mean, it's just here. And if I were to cut out every person in my life who questioned the Democrats, or even said the Democrats are wrong, or said Trump's got some good ideas, I mean, there would be nobody left. So I mean, this is my personal approach. I mean, people have different feelings about it. I can sit next to somebody and talk about something that has nothing to do with politics. Like I have had people come in the house, we work from home. They come in the house to do some work or something. They might hear me talk, which I shouldn't be doing that. But, and then they'll ask me, and they're like, well, I just don't agree with that. And I said, well, does that mean we can't be friends? You're still going to come here and do the job and do all of that. You find the things that and I know everybody says it, but you find the things that you have in common. Everybody has families, everybody has children, everybody has workplace. I mean, it's like all these things, gardening, whatever it is. So I guess what I'm saying is, I don't know that I advise people to try to persuade their family and friends. What I
Mhm.
do suggest is, a comment here or there, like, somebody like, because everybody has somebody gay in their family, right? And
Mhm.
and you do something really positive and make them think about the impact to them personally. I mean, people are going to start understanding with the economy, with the
Mhm.
401ks, but there's still the vast majority who are willing to let that play out. But it is about people understanding how it impacts them or those they love personally.
Mhm. And you're right. I think like it's too hard to until it affects them, until it affects them. I I go to these little podunk Arizona Facebook groups and just to see what's going on. Sometimes sometimes I might find, oh, there's this thing that's happening at their local public school district and it's something that we should be paying attention to. Well, then let's get on it. But oftentimes too, I'll just post something in the comments or, like little explanations. Like today, I just read an article about how because of the tariffs, Mack trucks they're slashing like hundreds of jobs in the United States. So, I just happened to see that. And then I just happened to see some, Facebook post. And so I put, about how great tariffs are. And I didn't say anything. I just said, here you go. And they will rage at me, even if I don't engage with them. But at the very least, I'm dropping just a little bit of information that maybe at some point they'll be like, maybe I will read that.
Yeah.
you know
I did not see that headline. I think that's right. Information is your friend, right? It is the more information you can get, as long as you're not only getting it from Facebook, then that is our best way forward. And even then you're not going to convince everybody because they're going to think everything they read is fake news.
Mhm.
And or some people are going to think that everything they read is gospel. And we can't do that. We have to balance it. But yeah, I think that's a very clever strategy.
This is a good quote here from Gina. A longtime dear friend of ours who is a firm Republican is typically very quiet about politics. He came for dinner the other night and would not shut up about the dismantling of our democracy, the erosion of our foreign relationships, and of our economy. It was delightful to see him all riled up in good ways. It gave me hope. If he's scared, folks are going to start waking up. That's good.
That's a
And
great story. Because caring about democracy and being a Trump supporter, I mean, they don't go together. And people care about democracy. It does mean something. America means something.
yeah, I just hope we can make it to our 250th birthday. I hope we'll wait and see, I guess. So we only have about 5 minutes left, and because there is so much terrible stuff happening in the world, I tend to end our Friday discussions the same day, or I mean the same way every day. And so I'd like to ask you, Wendy, what gives you hope?
Well, I think that what gives me hope is I do think it's the people in our country, because I do have faith. Like the friend that just told the story about,
Mhm.
I do have faith that the majority of people in this country, care about humans. I
Mhm.
think that. And I think that a lot of people are, I mean, they may have very specific reasons for supporting Trump, but eventually they're not gonna want to be a part of something that hurts people. And I
Mhm.
believe it 100%. Now, that's what gives me hope. Also gives me a little hope. I don't know if y'all um, is that as much as Trump has done, we did have a situation where countries in some of the European countries were moving to the right. The far right parties were gaining seats and getting in power. And that seems to be reversing.
Yeah.
And that is great. I mean, that is amazing because Europe is saying no, thank you, America. Now that's not good for a lot of reasons, but it's good to stand up and it'll have an impact. So
Mhm.
faith in people.
Mhm. Well, and here in Arizona, we have this funding for people with developmental disabilities, and we have a few local GOP representatives who are trying to slash this funding like by half. And these are folks in our most vulnerable members of our society, children with disabilities, grown people with disability. I mean, it's and everybody knows somebody who has some kind of, whether it's an intellectual disability, developmental disability. We all know somebody. I mean, maybe they're neurodivergent or whatever. We now have these Republican moms who helped to get these guys elected, now launching a recall campaign. So, it's taking something really terrible to get them to see that these folks want to hurt them, but it's happening. Um, yeah, so there is hope out there, and people are going to not want to see vulnerable people hurt. That's what we can hope. For us, in the meantime, if you all want to learn more about what is happening in the courts, I just want to remind everybody here on this call. And as a matter of fact, Wendy, we're going to try to make this a live streaming event, so you could even just sit from Alabama and eat popcorn if you want to. But we're having a Logger with the Lawyer event with Diane Post, our legal director, and Bob McWhorter, who's a constitutional attorney. Diane is a human rights attorney. And so they're going to just be keeping us up to date about what's happening. So if you're interested in that, feel free to sign up. But for today, oh my gosh, Wendy, I am so glad that you joined us today. And thank you for that example of hope. I really appreciate that.
Well, thank y'all. I think this is great. Thank you for having me and good luck
Great.
to you.
Thank you. Have a nice weekend, Wendy, and everybody else have a nice weekend too. Take care.
Bye bye.